This is a Wave breaking news alert.
We're continuing to follow breaking news after a building explosion on Payne Street. We thank you for staying with us here on Wave News at 5. I'm Myra Ansari.
I'm John Bull. Right now, we know at least 11 people have been taken to the hospital for treatment. And just about 20 minutes ago, the shelter-in-place order has been lifted. However, the evacuation order for a couple of blocks around that explosion are still in place. So many angles to pursue here coming up this hour. We know so far no fatalities. We know the air monitoring has all been clear so far. And we know there was a prior fatal explosion at that plant just over 2 decades ago. We'll get into all those angles in just a moment.
Yeah, we want to go first out to Wave News reporter Kirsten Foote live at the scene, talking to folks who live in that area.
We stood here for probably about an hour.
Yeah, Myra, John, I'm down here on Payne Street in Charlton, a couple blocks away from where the scene is. You can still see the amount of emergency responders that go up the street all the way at Payne Street. I've talked to some neighbors that live around this area. They were kind of pulled up around where this crime scene tape is. They weren't able to get up to their homes. Just before, about 5 minutes ago or so, I saw a group of people that were able to get escorted up to their home to see what their homes look like. And I had also talked to someone who was at work when this happened, and they were able to get up to their home a few minutes before that and see what their home looks like. They live across the street from that plant. They had some broken windows, and they have some cats that were a little bit shaken up from what had happened, but they have been able to confirm that their home just has some broken windows here, and then the rest of the people that we've been speaking with, they've been able to get up there and see what this damage looks like here. But a lot of people that I've spoken to that have been passed around here, you know, some people were in the Highlands and they heard this a mile away, and they've been coming over to this area to check out what things look like here. So again, a very big scene here down on Payne Street. A lot that we just still don't know for those homeowners who live on the street, just what their homes look like. And we'll be sure to keep you guys updated with what we learn more tonight as we learn more about what's going on. John, Myra, I'll send it back to you guys.
All right, Kirsten, we thank you for your report out there. John, this happened around 3 o'clock today, and our SkyTrack camera actually captured that explosion.
Yeah, that's the only place you'll find something like this. Other people have been talking about what happened. Our SkyTrack camera, we cropped it, zoomed in a little bit, showed you exactly what it looked like from afar.
We're going to have that here in just a second. But, John, in that video, you can see the explosion happen and this big poof of white air.
Yeah, plume of smoke, white plume that kept going forever and ever.
Yes.
Okay, we'll get to that in just a second. I've also got it on my Twitter page, and news media outlets nationwide have asked for the video. Here we go, right here. There was the blast.
Okay.
You saw in the top right-hand corner. And it takes about 30 seconds for the white smoke to actually start to dissipate for the first time. But that blast came in the center of the building. Here we go again. Watch it. And there's the blast. People could hear that and feel that for miles around Louisville.
Absolutely. People could feel it all the way up into the Highlands. We had a crew at Mid-City Mall, and they felt it over there. But you imagine that magnitude. It shattered windows. Doors were flying off of homes. Homes in that area are very cramped, very close to one another.
That's why when we heard in the official update here from the city officials just a short time ago that they only actually had to rescue 2 people from the building. The others were transported for other reasons. But that's kind of amazing when you look at that.
They said one person was pinned. They were able to get them out. That the business, which is called Sense Color by Givaudan, that is the business. They also had a plan in place to get people out safely. Wave News reporter Logan Perrone was out listening to first responders with more information on how they handled this scene.
Yeah, John and Myra, I just want to, first of all, put you where we guys are. We're on the 1900 block of Payne Street, but we're just down on the other side from where Kirsten is. Now, again, we got some nuts and bolts from officials here. And I just want to show you, road's still blocked off here. But some of the information that we were able to gather from officials is this. We know that this came in around 3 p.m. Again, this is at a Givaudan Sense Color. It's a color manufacturing place. As of right now, there are no known fatalities at this time. They could not confirm whether there are or not. Again, just no known fatalities at this moment. We do know, again, 11 people taken to the hospital. We did ask about their conditions. We did not get any information on those conditions at this time. And we know that those evacuations, again, that order that was just lifted, those were precautionary because residents' windows in that little radius were destroyed. They couldn't truly have a shelter in place. Now, again, we were able to hear from officials. The fire chief, Brian O'Neill, had good things to say about their rescue efforts.
Plant personnel did an amazing job with their emergency action plan to get most of the people out. Once our firefighters arrived, they did make an aggressive interior attack. We had one person that was pinned. We were able to get them out, rescue them, as well as assist the others in evacuation.
Now, this is still very much an active scene, and we know that the officials were looking to get us an update later tonight. We'll have that information for you as soon as it becomes available, but for now, we're live. Logan Perrone, Wave News.
All right, thank you, Logan. Within minutes, the Wave troubleshooters received tips from people who remembered a blast in that same neighborhood at the same plant just over 20 years ago, so we got to work.
Yeah, Wave News troubleshooter Natalia Martinez has been digging into the business's past.
And we found out that in 2003, in fact, that same company had another explosion that killed a 44-year-old man. And what happened then is around 2 a.m., there was a tank that held 40,000 pounds of ammonia that exploded. And the explosion back then could be felt for about 3 miles away from the actual facility. It was at the same exact location, that 1901 Payne Street, and other people were hurt, but one worker in 2003. Here we go. This is what we're looking at. That is the tank, and this is what it looked like back in 2003 when this same company, back then it was referred to as D.D. Williamson and Company. However, when I just called the company just now that has a new name, they still answered the phone as D.D. Williamson and Company. So it is, in fact, the same company, apparently, that they have been in the food coloring and additive business for about 155 years. They make things that go into drinks, Coca-Colas, food juices, fountain drinks, coffee mixers. They make syrups and powders, flavorings, coloring, powdered sugar, things like that. Their last inspection was in 2021. I haven't found so far any other major red flags with OSHA, the government department that is in charge of regulating this kind of industry or this kind of facility. So no major flags that I found just yet. But it is, in fact, that same company. And by the way, they do have another location here in Louisville. This company is global. They have offices and factories in Africa, in the UK, another facility in New Jersey, in Ohio. They also have another facility at 100 South Spring Street here in Louisville. They list Louisville as their actual headquarters, but again, they've been around for 155 years doing the same kind of food coloring and additive products. I'm tracking down the CEO and the president of this company. We do know that they are from the University of Kentucky and have been with the company for more than 20 years, so I'm trying to track them down right now. I can tell you that LMPD, I spoke to the chief just briefly, and he said that LMPD is right now assisting with the traffic and the flow of people and trying to contain the area. The officers are trying to help fire and the other emergency workers the best they can. So I'll update you guys with whatever else information I can find, and if I can talk to the company that has now suffered this immense tragedy.
All right, Natalia, thank you. And as you saw from that video that we showed you from our Skytrack camera, when that explosion went off, the plume of smoke from it also just kind of spread out quickly because of the winds. That's why folks were urged to shelter in place.
Yeah, you can see blowing it again. Let's take another look here from our Skytrack camera. The blast, and then you see the smoke going in a southerly direction. So let's get over to our chief meteorologist, Kevin Harder, to find out more about who was vulnerable to the aftermath of that. And Kevin, it's interesting, we still don't know for sure the chemical involved in this. The blast that Natalia was talking about 21 years ago was ammonia. Still haven't gotten confirmation on that here.
Yeah, and as it stands, it happened fairly fast. So that's the good news. That the plume went up, came right back down, which indicates there wasn't a long burn off or a long leak of whatever may have been coming into the atmosphere. So it could have just been an initial explosion, the plume from that, and then it's gone. That's, if you're going to have an explosion, the best case scenario. You can see, obviously, there's no smoke on the horizon. There's no plume still coming up. That's a live view as we look over toward the Clifton area. Let me show you. We've zoomed in. You'll notice this area. Again, there's the plume after the explosion occurred. You can see that is moving off to the south and west. So we had northeast winds coming in, bringing that smoke closer to Cherokee Road, moving off to the south and west of the and you saw that spark right there. So the spark happened, boom, big explosion, and then the sort of the plume of residual smoke or debris. Both. I mean, we've seen a lot of damage with this. Our winds are coming in from the north and northeast. Again, you can see now mainly an east wind in St. Matthews. That's taking the smoke back to the west or whatever's in the air. There's not a lot of smoke now. Relatively light, 10 to 15 mile per hour winds. We needed a little wind to help mix it up. That's what mixes it out of the atmosphere. So a little bit of wind is good. You'll notice temperatures running in the 50s this hour, and that's where we've been throughout the day. We are under a clear sky, so no major weather problems today. We noticed earlier that we had that 1 mile radius of the shelter in place, but that has since been lifted. There is still a 2-block evacuation while they still make sure everything is, on the up and sort of secure. And there's a lot of damage within that 2-block radius. So the shelter in place has ended, but the evacuation has not. Only adding to the problems would be some traffic issues. We've got a couple of accidents going on. There's one on 64. This one's being cleaned up. This is eastbound. This was, again, coming in about an hour, not quite an hour ago, quarter till the hour is what time it started. 3 lanes were blocked, so 64 eastbound's a little backed up as we speak. So going to be some travel problems, obviously, in Clifton and over toward the Payne Street area, but even across the city, we've got some other issues, guys.
All right, thank you, Kevin. We've been real fortunate here with the air quality and the monitoring and the shelter in place. In fact, it was really interesting just a few minutes ago in the update that the city officials gave us. Fire department said actually only a few houses actually had to be evacuated, and that was only because their windows were blown out and they really had no other choice. But so far so good with that.
Yeah, and you think about that area, it's a very tight area. Houses are close to each other. The streets are fairly narrow. Wave News reporter Mark Stevens is actually live out there right now on Pope Street to give us an update on the traffic conditions out there.
Well, as you guys have been reporting all afternoon, there have been a lot of road closures because of this ongoing emergency situation. LMPD has actually been reopening a lot of those closures on the western side of this incident. I'm at Pope and Charlton. This was closed earlier by LMPD. As you can see now, traffic is beginning to flow again. I can see people are at least able to get down to Payne. I'm not sure at Payne what direction they can't go, but it's been a real headache for people in this neighborhood. We've seen, a school bus trying to come through. It had to circle around. It was able to get down that way. Saw a FedEx delivery truck. Lots of people were originally stuck because LMPD had closed off alleyways, this street. Even just us getting over to this location was very difficult. Then LMPD did confirm to me as they were cleaning this up and taking down the crime scene tape that they were reopening the perimeter, at least on the western side of the incident. More still to come on when Payne will reopen. And even on this side of the explosion, we actually talked to a neighbor who was looking at a house they were looking at buying. It did have some damage. One of its windows was blown out. We're going to hear from them a little bit later. But for now, some streets are beginning to reopen in the Clifton neighborhood. Live in Louisville, I'll throw it back to you guys.
All right, Mark, thank you so much. And again, a recap, 11 people we know at least were injured. Thankfully, no fatalities that we know of so far from this workplace explosion that happened.
All right, and just a few homes had to be evacuated. The shelter in place was lifted. All air monitoring has been good since the outset, according to the mayor. We have many more angles, much more coverage coming up on this big explosion in the Clifton neighborhood. Still ahead. We'll take a break right now on Wave News. Oh, what a day. Our continuous coverage continues here on Wave News with this big explosion of a plant called Givaudan, a coloring factory in the Clifton neighborhood.
Yeah, this explosion was so intense. It happened around 3 o'clock today, 1901 Payne Street, that it shook so many structures nearby, homes and businesses. People were just startled, not understanding at first what was going on. Emergency responders told us that they had a fire, a structure collapse, hazardous materials situation. A lot going on all at once. But as we've been showing you from the video, the number of first responders who were there responding to this. And
huge response. Yeah. And the way it sounded initially as it was unfolding, some of the early reports were that there were people trapped, etc. Here's a video. Look at it. As far as the eye can see, our reporters being held so far away from this as it's gone. But in terms of if you're just getting home now from work, it really, the tallies, the numbers here are not as bad as one might have expected here. Yes, 11 people total had to go to the hospital, but they only actually rescued 2 people from the building. There are no fatalities to report here. Everyone was accounted for, and the air monitoring has been clear, the mayor said, ever since they started monitoring.
And you can see folks walking around there. No one is wearing any type of face masks or protective gear, so they said that the air is safe for folks. But the issue is that they're still there. They're urging folks, if you are at home right now, stay there. And if you're watching all of this from work or wherever you may be, just give it some time before you can head home.
And the people who live in that neighborhood, who've been there a while, remember well another fatal explosion at that same address by D&D Williamson. It was named at the time, where one worker who was overseeing a piping, a vessel coming in with some ammonia, and tens of thousands of gallons of ammonia exploded and killed that worker.
Okay, so Kirsten Foote has been live there at the scene close by, talking to folks who live in that area. Kirsten, what can you tell us?
Yeah, Myra, I've talked to a lot of people who live in the area when they weren't home when this explosion happened. They came here. They've been waiting to see what their homes looked like. And a group of people that I spoke with earlier, they were able to get up to their homes, and we haven't seen them just here yet. But the plant where this happened is just above the hill behind me where all these first responders are. It's just over at the top of that hill, so we can't really see it from where we are. But I'm joined here by Kim. Kim, you don't live on the street, but you are a landlord. You have a tenant who lived on this street and was home when this happened. Just tell me what they experienced and what's going through your head right now.
Sure. She called me moments after it happened. She was very shook up. Very loud explosion. My front window is blown out. Things were knocked off the walls. Things like that. She did turn the phone. She FaceTimed me, and she turned the phone, and I saw a big cloud of dust. There was smoke coming into the house through the open window. At this point, we don't know about any other damage. We're going to walk up there and bring our trusted plywood to hopefully cover up the window and find if there's any other damage.
Yeah, so how is your tenant doing? What did she do after that explosion happened?
Yeah, she was pretty shook up. She had to get her dogs and some stuff, and she got out. She went to her boyfriend's house, so she's safe, thank goodness. I'm glad for that. My neighbor next door, I talked to her, and she's also safe and also got out safely. She had a little bit more damage to her house, she told me. Some doors and windows are kind of off the frame.
Gotcha. So you haven't seen your home just yet, but what are you expecting to see? What are you most nervous about?
I'm most nervous about structural damage. I know, like I said, a roof. We just replaced the roof. Things like that I'm really worried about.
Yeah, so you guys have this plywood here ready to go, ready to board up those windows right now.
Yes, and we are walking over there to do that right now.
All right. Well, I don't want to keep you guys up there. I will let you guys go up there. I know that you guys spoke with police officers, and they will escort you guys up there. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Well, thank you guys for taking the time to talk with us. I really appreciate it, and best of luck. Thank you guys. So again, a lot of neighbors are coming home. They were at work when this happened, or just out and about, and so coming home, seeing the scene has really been a shock to a lot of them, and more have been led up. They've been escorted to be able to go take a look at what their homes look like. They live right across the street from that plant. So again, the street is still blocked off here, but people are being allowed to get up there to their home with an escort up there. So I'll send it back to you guys. Reporting live, Kirsten Foote, Wave News.
All right, Kirsten, thank you. So smart of them to bring that plywood out there to board up their homes. You think that's going to get dark here shortly, so folks are probably eager to board up and try to assess what happened as soon as they can before it gets too dark out there. But we know that this scene is quite big. Let's take a look at our drone video that's coming into our newsroom, if we can go to that.
We want to show you exactly what the situation looks like at this moment here. 5:20 in the afternoon. You see the sun setting. And there's still some smoke rising up. But here's the thing. It's in the exact middle of that building. See that long rectangular building in the middle of your screen? Zoom in there to the middle with your eyes, and you can see that that is the part that was blown up. And what's really interesting is when Natalia Martinez was showing us still photos of the explosion there 21 years ago that killed somebody, looks exactly the same. Large beams, bowed out. under the impact of the explosion. You got the same kind of situation there right now.
But John, look at how close that is to homes right there.
Yeah.
So when that explosion happened, you can see so much of that center of the building is gone. How that impacted homes nearby.
That's why I keep saying it's a miracle that we don't have fatalities in this situation.
Yeah, 11 people were injured. We know that they are taken to the hospital.
Well, we know 11 were sent to the hospital.
Yes.
We don't know if they were injured. A lot of times they do that out of precaution.
Yes, as a precaution. We don't know the extent of their injuries,
right.
But we'll get updates to see how they're doing.
So if you've ever driven that area there, Pope, Frankfurt, that area down there, it's like Myra was just saying, it's very congested. Everything is jammed in there, it seems, at times. But again, the fire department said they only had to evacuate just a couple of houses because their windows were blown out.
Yeah, one person was pinned in the structures. They were able to get that person out. But they also mentioned that the plant employees did a good job with getting out and implementing their evacuation process as well.
As you continue to look at the steam or mist or fog above the plant there, we haven't gotten confirmation, at least of the last update here, on what the chemical was. We believe it may have been ammonia. Ammonia was the chemical in the previous explosion, the fatal explosion back in 2003.
So, John, the big question is, as folks are getting home tonight or that have had damage, what are they going to do overnight? Where are they going to go? Hopefully we can get a little bit more direction.
Yeah, we'll get more direction on that, but we don't know how many homes that actually entails. We know from what the fire department just said, there were a few homes that had the windows blown out.
Yeah. All right. We're going to take a break, and we will be right back with more coverage of this developing story happening in the Clifton area.
Welcome back to Wave News coverage here at 525 of the big blast in the Clifton neighborhood that everybody's talking about. We're going to take you up to our drone and take a closer look. We continue to stare, gawk, examine the magnitude of this blast. You can see pieces blown all over the neighborhood. Kind of reminds you of tornado coverage, but this was some kind of chemical that exploded in the neighborhood.
Yeah, you can see just debris everywhere. I think our drone is trying to refocus. If we can shift back to what we were seeing, that would be great. But the building just in shreds there at the center.
Okay, there we go. Back to the shot. You can see the very center of the building, blown, twisted metal. The wooden parts of the building blown all across the neighborhood. This is down Frankfurt, Pope area of town. We can tell you 11 people had to go to the hospital. Everybody's accounted for in this. They had to rescue 2 people out of the building, but as of right now, we know of no fatalities. JCPS had to let school out early for the area schools there, but the main thing is, people are talking about this because so many people either heard it or felt it wherever they work or reside.
They could hear it. It was very loud, very intense. And I believe we have some Nest doorbell video of you can hear the explosion. Are we able to pull that up? Okay, let's listen in. Yeah, you hear that boom.
Yeah, you know what that sounds like? When I fish at Otter Creek, it sounds like the blast going on at Fort Knox when they're practicing with their ammunition.
And, you know, a lot of folks caught off guard at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. What on earth was that sound? They were immediately questioning it. People who live at quite a distance, all the way to the Highlands, they could feel it. So it was very scary for a lot of folks.
Yeah, and we've already shown you, and we will show you again, a visual of the blast. One of our SkyTrack cameras just happened to catch it. But right now we want to get over to Wave troubleshooter Natalia Martinez because she's been investigating the company. We've been reporting they had a fatal blast at that same address, that same plant back in 2003. Let's get over to Natalia now for the latest she's learned on any violations or any ramifications of their conduct.
Okay, so first let me tell you what this company does. They produce additives and food colorings. You find them in syrups and powdered sugars, in fountain drinks and juices and coffee mixers. So this is what they do. In 2003, we know that there was a tank that exploded at the facility. That tank contained 40,000 pounds of ammonia. It killed a 44-year-old man back then. Luckily, that explosion happened at 2 a.m. when there weren't that many people working at the facility. So I started started looking at the company itself. It's got factories all over the world. It's got factories in New Jersey and Ohio. There's some in the UK, in China. There's a factory in Africa. They've been doing this sort of business for 155 years. Their CEO and president for the Louisville locations here I just left her a message, Elaine Gravette. She is a University of Kentucky graduate, and I started looking at what kind of violations this company had, if any, throughout the years. And OSHA didn't have any violations for them, but I have learned that the Louisville Metro Air Pollution Control District did actually have 2 separate violations in May of 2023 as well as in December, and those violations were because they had failed, according to the documents, to submit their annual reports, their semi-annual reports, and compliance certifications according to the deadlines. They faced a $5,000 up to a $10,000 fine for those violations, and then I also found another set of violations that included their failure to submit notices of excess emissions during their conditions within the appropriate time frames that Louisville Metro requires these companies to fill. We do know that at first, when this all happened, hazmat had a heavy presence, and one of those concerns was ammonia, according to my sources. That concern has seemed to have kind of died down as they've gotten in and assessed what the cause of this explosion may have been. But they reminded us that this is very active. There is a collapsed structure, meaning there are areas of this factory that they can't access just yet. And so we're not out of the woodworks in terms of what could be the source of this and whether any possible problems show up here in the near future as they go in and assess what exactly was in this factory. But we do know 2 violations were given to them by the Louisville Metro Air and Pollution Control within the last 2 years, guys.
All right, Natalia, thank you. So we just got an update from U of L Health. They tell us that they're treating 7 of the 11 patients injured, and we're going to get an update from the Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Jason Smith, in about 20 to 40 minutes. We'll, of course, bring you any updates from that.
As we go to break, remember, wave3.com and the Wave News app. Always a way to stay up on top of this stuff. If you can't sit in front of the TV like you're doing right now, we'll be back with more coverage of this plant explosion in Clifton on Wave News after we take a break. One of the things people do when there's a big explosion, big news event like this in Louisville is they run to their security cameras, and they might have been shooting something on their phone to see if they caught the blast, sound or video. We ran to our SkyTrack cameras, and sure enough, we caught the actual explosion. Yeah, let's take a look at it. You can see right there in the corner of your screen, poof, there it is. That puff of white remnants of the explosion just in the air blowing. Of course, this explosion just rocked homes, rocked businesses. We know that a total of 11 people were taken to the hospital to be checked out. We don't know the extent of their injuries from this, but homes had their windows busted out, doors just kind of knocked off as well. And you can see by the size of the plume of smoke there that continued for quite a while right after the blast. Here's an even closer look. Yeah. Look at that. And even though Kevin pointed out there wasn't a whole lot of wind at the time, you could sure see a big cloud of smoke right there. Absolutely. And we've also seen some Ring doorbell cameras. You catch the audio, the big poof coming from that sound. And as you mentioned, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, folks are wondering, well, what on earth was that? I was shooting something in old Louisville, and emergency response vehicles went by me like crazy. I went right to my phone and figured it right out. So this is a live look from our drone. You can just see the center of that building just annihilated there in shreds. Okay, so what's interesting to me after we just saw the video of the actual explosion is that any of this building is even left, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, think about it. You can, both ends are virtually intact. So it looks like train tracks that are running along it as well. Is that correct? Is that what we're looking at? Who knows how far that
debris shot out where it went.
Yeah, and I've also had a number of people. So I tweeted out our picture of our video of the explosion right away. We've had a number of people respond. Now, I haven't had a chance to check and analyze this as carefully as they have, but they were saying that a train was going by right at that moment.
Wow.
And they were wondering if some dynamic between the two led to the blast. So I'm sure they're investigating that.
Let's go out to Kirsten Foote now, talking to folks who are just getting home and finding this damage to their houses.
Yeah, John Meyer, we know this happened around 3 o'clock this afternoon, so a lot of people that we've spoken with, they were at work when this happened, so a lot of them are just now being able to get back to their homes and see exactly what kind of damage they have. And one of those people here that I have with me is Joseph. Joseph, you were at work when this happened.
A bunch of texts asking me if I had gone to work already, and if not, was I okay? And then my boss said, why don't you go home and make sure everything's okay, because I got a little kitty cat and I wanted to make sure she was okay. And I finally got through and everything's well. It was a bit of a mess, got a couple of broken windows, but other than that, things are okay.
Yeah, I know. I spoke with you before you were able to head up there, and you're one of the first ones I've been able to speak with that's seen what their property looks like. Do you have any broken glass in your apartment or anything like that?
Yeah, the front door is completely demolished. I've got 2 broken windows, and that's it. Just a bunch of stuff fell off shelves. My poor plants kind of hit the deck and they're all over the floor. But other than a mess and just some, luckily the inside glass didn't break, so I won't have to board anything up, but it could have been worse, definitely.
Yeah, so I mean, as we look at this whole block right up here, just all of these first responders, just what did you see as you were able to get up the street there?
Well, there's a lot of debris all over the street, and I was surprised that it must have been some blast for it to hurl these like heavy metal girders at this distance. There's one about 6 feet long lying in the front yard of my apartment, so if that had landed on a car or someone, it could have been a much worse situation.
Yeah, 6 feet is all that really just takes. Just what's been going through your head, your neighbors, your friends, anything like that?
Well, I mean, as far as I can tell, everybody I know is safe, so that's a relief. Other than that, I'll just have to wait, and hopefully no bad news comes my way.
Did you ever expect anything like this would happen here?
No, it's just a regular Monday, and I just get these texts, and I'm like, the worst thoughts go through your mind. You're thinking, my apartment building is gone or something like that, but relieved to see that it's nothing like that.
Yeah, well, it's about 5:30 here, and this happened a little over 2.5 hours ago. You had to head back to work, but what is your plan for tonight? What do you think tonight will look like for you?
Well, I mean, if I was able to get through at this point, I'm sure it'll be cleared out quite a bit I get off work at 11. So hopefully I'll be able to drive all the way home. I had to park and walk, but we'll see.
What is your message to your other neighbors, community members, anyone that's been affected by this tonight?
You're just going to have to go home and check it out for yourself, because I'm sure different places were affected in different ways. So.
Well, thank you so much, Joseph. I'm glad that everything's okay. Thank you for taking the time to stop with us and share and just give our viewers a little bit more of an insight of what it looks like up this hill from me. Yeah, thank you. Well, best of luck. I'll get back to work for me. Thank you. And again, as you can see, the scene here is very active. Just this whole line of just emergency first responders up the street. Traffic is still being redirected from this direction over here. So people who are getting back to this area to be able to look at their homes, they aren't able to park here. They have to walk a bit of a ways here, and a lot of first responders here. They're coming in and out up through this area, seeing them come and go for the last few hours here. So again, a lot of neighbors that we've spoken with, they were at work when this happened, and they're just now being able to get up to their homes and see what damage has been done. A lot of broken windows that we've heard. Other people that we spoke to earlier, they brought boards. They're ready to board up some of those windows from that explosion tonight. So reporting live here, just a couple blocks away from that explosion. Kirsten Foote, Wave News.
Kirsten, thank you. So one possible message to neighbors might be gratitude, because did you hear that? As far away as he lives, he said there's a steel girder blown all that way through the air right into his property.
Yeah, hopefully.
Wow.
It's amazing. So this happened at Sense Color by Givaudan. That's how the mayor pronounced it. That's where the business explosion happened. Wave News reporter Mark Stevens is now live with us. He's talking to other folks who live in the area.
Yeah, I can tell you, we were actually on a reporting assignment in the Smoketown neighborhood, and as the details are coming in, I'm pretty sure we heard the explosion there as well around that time, because it was right before school dismissal at Mazik Middle School. So when we got up here about 4 o'clock into the Clifton neighborhood on Pope Street, we actually ran into a guy who was looking at buying a house further up the street to flip. He was telling us that I believe I recall he said he heard 2 explosions, one smaller one and then one big one. Now that may have been just the reverberations. I asked him, did it sound like those cherry bomb type fireworks that you hear? And he said, no, it doesn't even compare. Way louder than that. So they heard the boom. He said everyone in the neighborhood here on Pope ran out of the house to see what was going on. When I looked on the map, Pope Street is about a quarter mile away from this plant. If you go in a straight line as the crow flies, is the saying. It's a little longer if you go down the streets. But this is what he said, because they went back in the house. They found some damage.
We went back inside to take additional pictures of the inside. The window in the back door had been completely blown out from it. I mean, as soon as it happened, everyone came running out of their house. Did you hear that? Did you hear that? So, but yeah, my back door completely blew the window out.
Now, Rush said that was the only damage to the building he was looking at purchasing. We haven't seen any other neighbors, at least on Pope Street, report any damage to us. All we know at this point is that more and more people are able to get back into their neighborhoods after all those streets were closed earlier in the afternoon. I will toss it back to you, reporting live in the Clifton neighborhood. Mark Stevens, Wave News.
All right, thank you so much, Mark. And it's time when folks are getting off of work. They're watching the news. They're trying to figure out, was my home impacted? Right. And hopefully it's not as bad as some of the folks are experiencing.
Well, here's the good news for you. Normally, if we're covering a hazardous materials explosion with people rushed to the hospital, normally when we cover these kinds of stories, we're on the air for hours and hours because there's a threat, a hazardous chemicals threat. We can tell you the air monitoring has been clear the whole way, so the next steps in this will be determining the damage, and also we've received no word of any fatalities, albeit 11 people were transported to a hospital. We're going to continue to keep you up to date. Take a break here on Wave News and continue with more coverage of this plant explosion in just a moment. If you are just getting home from work, Wave News covering this plant explosion in the Clifton neighborhood, Payne Street, Frankfurt Pope, right in that area. A company called Givaudan, a coloring factory. You're looking right here at the initial response of all the emergency response vehicles. We can tell you, as of this moment, we know of no fatalities. We know of 11 people transported to the hospital. U of L Hospital was treating 7 of them. There are no people accounted for. That's a key, because there's so much of this damage here that looks like it has not been penetrated or navigated yet by emergency response people.
For those that were taken to the hospital, we don't know the extent of their injuries. We are hoping to get an update from U of L Health. Their chief medical officer, Dr. Jason Smith, is supposed to give us an update to let us know how those patients are doing. But this explosion happened around 3 o'clock today, and it could be felt, it could be heard. Very scary for a lot of folks that live there.
Also, the important thing for the neighborhood around that is all of the air monitoring done by the city has shown no problems, clear. They lifted the shelter-in-place warning that they had pretty quickly in this. Let's get out to Alina Noakes, Wave News reporter Alina Noakes, with the latest.
Hey there, John. We're out here at U of L Hospital, where they are currently undergoing what they are calling decontamination activity on the patients that were brought here. You told us earlier there were at least 6 that we know of that were brought to the hospital here. We're actually going to throw it back to you. The chief medical officer here is speaking with us, so we're going to go take that press conference live. Just come back to us in just a second, okay?
All right, we will fill until we get over to Dr. Jason Smith. Again, fire officials told us they were kind of amazed changed. They didn't have to evacuate that many people. The only people they had to evacuate were the people who had busted out windows and really had no choice. They couldn't shelter in place because their homes are wide open.
Yeah, we've heard from a couple people who are either getting off of work right now. They're trying to access their home. One couple, they brought up plywood to board up their windows in their home because their windows were shattered. So this is the time where folks are getting home right now and they're trying to figure out, okay, what do I do next?
It's interesting. We still have not gotten confirmation on what the exact chemical was. We believe it to be ammonia. Still have not gotten a confirmation on that. Ammonia was the chemical that was part of the explosion back in 2003 at this very same site when one 44-year-old man who was an operator at the plant died after an explosion. But again, no confirmation on whether or not this was ammonia. Here's some pictures of that blast that the wave troubleshooters have already found back in 2003. There's the train tracks near the plant. You can see stuff blown that far. We just interviewed live a neighbor who lives quite a distance away who said he found a steel girder from that plant blown all the way into his yard. And look at that picture right there. That looks a lot like the close-ups of the middle of the building where the blast happened today.
Okay, we're going to go live now to this press conference happening with U of L Health.
Hospital received 7 casualties from the blast area today. Currently 2 of those are in critical condition. The other 5 are in stable condition, currently being evaluated for their injuries. I want to thank our fire department who helped with decontamination of the individuals. I want to thank our staff who did an outstanding job with decontamination and managing this. Obviously, an explosion like this in this area is always a difficult problem to manage, but luckily we have been able to take care of all the patients that we received and continue operations here at University Hospital.
With a blast this large, this could have been a much different situation, no doubt.
Absolutely. And I think that's the biggest problem with blast injuries is it really is a little bit of everything. It can be burns, it can be blunt injuries, it can be penetrating injuries, trapped by debris, chemical explosions, and chemical exposures. So from that perspective, you know, it's great to have a team like this that can manage these patients.
Can you tell us the extent of some of those injuries?
So I can't tell you the extent of all the injuries. We're still in the process of evaluating everyone, but 2 of them are in critical condition currently from their injuries.
Decontamination process is in place. What exactly does that mean?
So decontamination processes from our standpoint mean that we're constantly evaluating the patients, removing any chemical explosions and exposure from them, and making sure that we've got the opportunity to clean them before they come back and get treated.
How long does that process take?
It can take anywhere from a few minutes to 15 minutes, and it depends on what the exposure. For something like this, we have an exposure of lots of different chemicals, so we make sure that we basically decontaminate them for everything. Yes, that's a decontamination process. So what we do is we actually take the patients, remove their clothing, remove all the chemicals from them, and then take them in the hospital for treatment and evaluation.
You mentioned there could be blast injuries, there could be burn injuries. Can you tell us, if you can, what types of injuries you saw today from this explosion? We're live.
We're live. So we saw a little bit of everything today from all the patients. There were a fair amount of burn injuries, a pretty significant amount of blast injuries as well, from the penetrating and blunt injuries from the force of the explosion, as well as some crush injuries where some debris had fallen on the patient.
So what's the recovery like from some of these injuries?
It all depends on the injuries themselves. I think the biggest thing that you run into in something like this is it's based off how severe the injuries they have, and you always worry about brain injuries just like we would for every other trauma, and then making sure that we can treat their orthopedic injuries or other sources of bleeding. Luckily right now we don't have any patients that I can identify that are bleeding significantly, so it's managing all of those blunt injuries that we have.
Dr. Smith, you mentioned Google Fire was here with that decontamination process. You saw LMPD. Can you talk about the team effort that goes into a situation like this?
Yeah, when you have something like this, it requires the assistance of LMPD, Metro Fire, Metro EMS, our hospital staff. We are on point with the city as well as their emergency response. you really can't treat patients like this without having all of those resources available. And we're lucky to be able to have that type of relationship with everybody here in the city. And, you know, when as bad as this is, they got everyone to the hospital, and we've been able to decontaminate and take care of everybody.
I don't know if we heard you over the shop now, but exposure to the type of chemicals that patients might see. What sorts of things do you worry about long-term in that type of exposure?
Yeah, luckily long-term exposure is not usually a problem in things like this. Where we do have a problem is in episodes like this, you don't know exactly everything that they've been exposed to. So we decontaminate them for basically anything and everything that is contained within any of the factories or processing, which is a little more extensive process, and that's why it's great to have Metro and have Metro Fire involved in that. But it's the only way to make sure that you've got everything taken care of.
Have you ever worked anything like this in the decontamination you're doing now?
So we have decontamination not infrequently. The most common reason to do decon is, for example, a car accident where you've got fuel or other fluids from the car that get into the or onto the passengers. So it's not an infrequent process like that. But we've not had an explosion like this or had this type of decontamination in quite a while.
I may have missed this, but what happens to the body as time will progress to these folks?
Yeah, so the biggest thing is all related to what their injuries actually are from that perspective. And so you have to treat those injuries individually, and that gives them their best opportunities to do well if you do things like that.
Thank you.
You got it.
I missed a little bit due to the helicopter.
Sure.
Can you just give me a little bit more on that decontamination procedure and just how unusual that is? Or maybe it is usual, I don't know.
Yeah, so the decontamination procedure is something we actually do infrequently, but we do train for it. And in particular, something like this is a little more extensive, obviously, than a car accident where you get gasoline or diesel fuel exposure, which is the most common reason to decontaminate somebody. With things like this, with industrial chemicals, while we train for it, we have to basically assume that they have been contaminated with everything in the factory or in the area where there's an explosion. And then after we decontaminate them, we bring them in for overall care from that perspective.
I mean, obviously you train for this, but you never hope for it to happen. Mm-hmm. In a situation like this, what are things that you just had to have in place so that way people are treated quickly?
Yeah, so the biggest thing is disaster preparedness and disaster management. We train our teams constantly here at U of L Hospital. We work in conjunction with the city, with EMS, and with Louisville Police for all of those things. And really from us, it's about standing up, whether that would be from the shooting at Old National Bank. We were talking about the tornado in Henryville a number of years ago where we were able to respond to that disaster. It's a different scale, obviously, for something like this, but it's always what we train for and what we do here at the hospital.
Jason, during that time at the Old National Bank shooting, you're one of those voices that people were looking to. What do you want to say during this time to reassure people like, yes, this big thing happened, but we are doing everything possible?
What I will tell people is really something like this just demonstrates the teamwork here within this community. And I think that's shown over and over again between what EMS, what fire, and what police do, the way they respond to things, their ability to get patients to us that we need to take care of, and the way that we can work with them to make sure that we do things like decontamination at the scene and bringing them here. You don't have that everywhere, and we are lucky to have that here in Louisville.
You're saying that the medical treatment is able to actually start before they get to the hospital?
Absolutely. And it starts from the scene and what they're able to do. I don't think you can say enough about what they do and how they respond to them.
Any other questions? All right, guys. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you all very much.
All right, U of L Health telling us that they have received 7 patients. 2 are in critical condition. The rest are stable. They're being evaluated. A big component in all of this and treating their patients is the decontamination process, as Dr. Smith was talking about what goes into that to make sure that moving forward that the patients get the correct care that they need, because that decontamination process is critical.
Yeah, I've always wondered what decontamination is like. You didn't really give a lot of details. You just said we have to be very careful for any possible chemical chemicals or whatever that they may have ingested or been exposed to. What was really interesting was, U of L is a level 1 trauma center. They see everything, right?
Everything.
But they don't see a lot of explosions like this. And when Dr. Smith was asked what kind of injuries they're treating, he said it's really, when it's an explosion, it's kind of all of the above. It's burns, it's blunt force trauma, i.e. a steel girder you're hitting the head by. A little bit of everything, he said.
Yeah, exactly. And they said a part of the thing is figuring out, they're worried about brain injuries from this. Also, any type of trauma and bleeding. All of those things have to be assessed, because sometimes in these sort of situations, you don't see all of the injuries. If you got whacked in the head, it may not be 100% visible, the extent of the injuries.
Okay, so again, no fatalities, but 2 in critical, 5 in stable condition at U of L Hospital. We're going to take a break and come back with the 6 o'clock news as our coverage continues right here on WAVE.